What is going on, everyone? How are you all doing today? Welcome to yet another episode of Hockey on the Spot with Brandon Barenfeld. I'm Brandon Barenfeld. Thank you all for joining me today. This is episode 133 of Hockey on the Spot, and I am pumped up because August has officially arrived, which means we're just about less than 2 months away from the beginning of the 2014-2015 season, particularly the preseason. The preseason will begin very, very soon, and then before you know it, the regular season will be here. And because it is August, it's now time for yet another year of the 30 teams in 30 days. This is my favorite part when it comes to doing these blogs. This is the month where I will be the most active, and I will be doing the videos every single day, just like last year. Now, I'm going to try to keep each of these videos around 20 minutes, maybe exactly, maybe a little under, maybe a little over. This one today might be a little bit over just because it is the first video. We'll see, though. But for the order NHL.com is going in, and the order I will be going in, I will be following NHL.com's order, is once again by division, but in a different order. Whereas last year the Metropolitan Division was last, this year it will be first. Then we will do the Central Division, then come back out east to do the Atlantic Division, and then the Pacific Division, which was first last year, will be last this year. And instead of going in alphabetical order by division, which was the case last year, it will be by standings from each division last year, from worst team to best team. And in result of that, since the first division is the Metropolitan Division, and since we are beginning with the last place team in that particular division, the team this year that will start off the 30 teams in 30 days is none other than the New York Islanders. And my, for the New York Islanders, what a disappointing year it was last year, a major setback year. It really was a setback year. This was a team going into the 2013-14 season looking to build off their first-round playoff exit in the 2013 lockout-shortened year. They lost in 6 games that year to the Pittsburgh Penguins, and what was a very good and very underrated Islanders team that year. They gave the Penguins quite a scare that year. And Evgeny Nabokov really led the charge. They were one of the best road teams in the league. It was their record on the road that got them into the playoffs, and they were looking to build off that. Well, I had predicted in my last Islanders video from all those months back, or from less than a year back, that the Islanders were going to have a setback year. I did predict that, and my prediction came true. Now, that wasn't the case at the very beginning of the year. For at the very beginning of the year, at a time when the Eastern Conference was just absolutely struggling to get victories, particularly the Metropolitan Division, which at the time was considered the most competitive division, there was, in fact, a point where the Islanders were one of the only teams getting wins in that division. They were the best team. They were, at one point, the top team in that Metropolitan Division. And they were doing so good that it even convinced a guy like Thomas Vanek to come over to the New York Islanders via a trade that sent Matt Moulson and a first-round pick to Buffalo. And then when they started to struggle and come back down to earth, the line of John Tavares, Kyle Okposo, and Thomas Vanek for that time that Thomas Vanek was on Long Island was one of the top lines in the National Hockey League. Nothing was getting by that line. They were doing everything for the Islanders, including getting them some wins. Then when the time came to talk a possible contract extension, which Garth Snow did offer Vanek a 7-year contract extension, he decided to decline the offer and had to be traded immediately afterwards, or almost immediately afterwards. He would be dealt at the deadline to the Montreal Canadiens in exchange for Sebastian Kohlberg and a second-round pick. Now, a lot of people say that this was a dumb move on Garth Snow's part. For people say he could have gotten a lot more if he was dealt to a team like the Anaheim Ducks, who had a much bigger and better offer on the table that could have that would have included big prospects, key future pieces, and of course what was eventually the 24th overall pick. The Ducks had some key pieces to give them, and Snow declined that for just one prospect and a second-round pick. That is a poor GM decision, in my personal opinion. And then, of course, he also traded Andrew McDonald to a division rival, the Philadelphia Flyers, and only got a second-round pick in return, when this is a defenseman who they could have gotten a lot more for. And then McDonald was signed to a 6-year contract extension by the Flyers. So a rough season for Garth Snow as far as being a GM. And to make things a little even more interesting, he chose to keep the 5th overall pick for this year rather than get a pick for 2015 to complete the Thomas Vanek deal, which took his team out of the Connor McDavid sweepstakes. They would use that 5th overall pick to select forward Michael Dalcall from the Oshawa Generals, a kid who is expected to be a good player, another Eric Stahl type player. So we'll see what happens. But as going back to the Islanders season, however, what probably was the official ending to the Islanders season came during the Olympics, when John Tavares went down with a season-ending injury and missed the final 22 games of the year. He's their captain, and he's their number one player. He's their best player. So losing him was a big blow to the team while he represented Team Canada. So for the final, as far as how the Islanders finished at the end of the year, their final record was 34, 37, and 11. That combines for just 79 points, which is dead last in the Metropolitan Division, and 14th overall in the East. They did not qualify for the playoffs last year. They finished 3 games under 500. So, after the draft, Garth Snow looked to build on that. And it started, really actually before the draft, when he made a trade with the San Jose Sharks to acquire the rights to UFA defenseman Dan Boyle. Dan Boyle chose not to sign with the Islanders, and to make matters even worse, he then went on to sign with their arch rivals, the New York Rangers. So a double whammy for Garth Snow and the Islanders, losing a 7th-round pick for absolutely nothing, or 5th-round pick, whatever they traded. So with that happening, the Islanders knew that they had to make some changes. This is a team that looked to get deeper, and one thing they did look to do was improve in goal. Knowing that they were going to lose Evgeny Nabokov, and that Kevin Poulin was not the ideal backup goaltender. Evgeny Nabokov is no longer with the New York Islanders. He is signed with the Tampa Bay Lightning for this offseason, and they also have Radek Martinek leaving. He is not yet signed with a team. Who knows if he even will, but the bottom line is that he will not be back in Long Island. So, with these losses, the Islanders freed up some space to get better, including improving in goal. That is another issue they addressed after the playoffs were done. They acquired the rights to goaltender Yaroslav Halak from the Washington Capitals in exchange for a draft pick, and unlike Dan Boyle, they were able to sign Halak. They signed Halak to a 4-year, $18 million deal. He played 52 games between the St. Louis Blues and Caps last season and went 29, 13, and 7 with a .225 goals against and .921 save percentage and 5 shutouts to boot. Some pretty decent numbers after finishing the season with a team that didn't even make the playoffs. Halak is a very good goaltender, and he definitely is an upgrade from the washed out Evgeny Nabokov. Now, does this mean they really solidified the position in net? Probably not. I think they could definitely get deeper in net. Yaroslav Halak is a good goaltender. He's not a great goaltender. Good enough to be a starter and good enough to solidify their goaltending for now. But in the near future, maybe within the next year, maybe two, the Islanders should look to go and trade for a better goaltender. This is just one of those things where they could sign him to a longer deal and then maybe use him as a trade chip to get a better goaltender and a younger goaltender in the future. And Yaroslav Halak was not the only goaltender they brought in. They also brought in backup Chad Johnson from the Boston Bruins. Chad Johnson had a career year last year backing up Tuukka Rask and the Bruins. Johnson has made a name now for himself as one of the better backup goaltenders in the league, after at one point being one of the jokes of the league. He was signed to a 2-year contract worth $2.6 million. He went 17-4-3 with a .210 goals against average and .925 save percentage for the Bruins. And one problem for the Islanders last season was that they lost 13 games when holding 2-goal leads. And a big issue and a big problem from that, a big reason for that was because of inconsistency on defense. They think they managed to make themselves a tiny bit deeper on defense with the addition of TJ Brennan. Brennan was a star last year for the Toronto Marlies and was given the award for the best defenseman, the Eddie Shore Award for best defenseman in the American Hockey League for the Toronto Maple Leafs minor league team. He has a chance to come up and be a regular in the Islanders lineup and maybe solidify their blue line a little bit. Then came the forwards that the Islanders added. They added Corey Conacher, who's coming over from the Buffalo Sabres. Corey Conacher split last season between Buffalo and Ottawa, and after a stellar rookie season between the Lightning and the Sens, it was a very dismal sophomore campaign for Corey Conacher. He now knows he's in a position where he has to prove himself again and try to make his place in the lineup. I think a team like the Islanders is the perfect place for a guy like Corey Conacher, a former American Hockey League stud, to do so. Corey Conacher, of course, is a very gritty player, and he'll help the Islanders and give them some depth, as well as possibly battle for a top-line spot with John Tavares and Kyle Okposo. But the real big signings by the Islanders came on the wing and at center. They added centerman Mikhail Grabovski coming over from the Washington Capitals, who was probably the big signing for them this offseason. They signed him to 4 years at $20 million after Grabovski failed to reach an agreement with the Washington Capitals. Grabovski is a guy with excellent hands and great puck handling abilities, and he doesn't lose the puck very much, which is something the Islanders need, and he's a guy who will take some pressure off of a guy like Frans Nielsen and maybe relieve Nielsen of some second-line duty. You can imagine those two are going to be battling each other for the honor of second-line center. The idea is that Grabovski would probably be the second-line center, but we will see. They also signed Nikolai Kulemin from the Toronto Maple Leafs to a 4-year, $16.75 million deal. This is a guy who is a former 30-goal scorer and a guy who can score some clutch goals in clutch situations. It was a rough year last year for both Kulemin and Grabovski, but Grabovski was hurt a couple times last year, so he had a bit of an excuse. Kulemin, though, did not have a good year playing under Randy Carlyle, and he and Grabovski, as we know, have great chemistry together when they played together along with Clark MacArthur, who of course is a member of the Ottawa Senators. But those two had the chemistry together in 2010, 2011, and they definitely can have the chemistry again. It's unknown if they'll be on the same line, but if they are, one can expect those two to do some damage with each other once again. But Nikolai Kulemin and Mikhail Grabovski are both very talented players, but they both had rough years last year. They're looking to get a fresh new start on Long Island, both of them. With these signings for the New York Islanders, that brings us to one of the big questions for the Islanders going into next year. there's a lot of questions that are being asked, but the one that pops in my mind the most is, who will play left wing on the top line with John Tavares and Kyle Okposo? Who will take Thomas Vanek's spot? Well, there's a lot of options for players that could take that spot, but the player that might be the most ideal to play on that line would be Brock Nelson, who was, of course, the 30th overall pick in 2010. Brock Nelson would be a great addition on that line. He had a very good year last year. He's ready to play on the team. As a rookie, 72 games played, 14 goals, 12 assists for a combined 26 points, which isn't bad for a rookie. He was a minus 10, but that's because he was playing on a bad team. So, Brock Nelson also has 1 game of playoff experience under his belt. So, this is a guy who can play center as well. So it'll be interesting to see whether he plays wing or center for next year, whether he plays with Tavares or maybe plays on another line. Maybe slot a guy like Michael Grabner on that top line. Who knows? Give them some extra speed. It's going to be interesting to see who plays on that line and who even plays in the lineup for next year for the Islanders. As far as what the lines could look like for next year, as I said before, we could see Brock Nelson on the top line left wing with John Tavares and Kyle Okposo. But we can also see guys like Mikhail Grabovski and Michael Grabner playing together with Nikolai Kulemin, and Michael Grabner moving from the right side to the left side. Grabner has become a premier penalty killer in this league, but at the same time, he's lost his scoring touch, or at least he did last year. He wants to get that back, and maybe a setup man like Grabovski could help him do so. Third line could look like Franz Nielsen, Ryan Strome, who could be ready to play full-time in the league and eventually get a bigger role, and Josh Bailey. That will be their shutdown line. And then the fourth line could look like Casey Cizikas with Cal Clutterbuck, centering Cal Clutterbuck, and Matt Martin with Colin McDonald and Eric Bolton as the healthy scratches. Expect that guys like Corey Conacher and Anders Lee will also battle to be in the lineup as forwards. For Anders Lee, he of course is one of the Islanders' top prospects. This is where the team is at their weakest, on defense. They have Calvin DeHaan, who had a nice rookie year and could look to improve on that, and Travis Hamonic, who technically could be their most trusted defenseman right now, though can you really trust him? Lubomir Vishnowsky will add veteran presence and that big shot of his on the power play with Thomas Hickey. And then, of course, you got Matt Donovan, who could be ready to play full-time, and Matt Karkner, who could see some more time this year, with Brian Straight being their 7th guy. But defensemen who could also battle for a spot are guys like TJ Brennan and Kevin Schumann, or however you say that name, or even a guy like Griffin Reinhart, who could very well be ready to play in the NHL this year. Griffin Reinhart will definitely battle for a spot. And then, of course, in goal, you got Jaroslav Halak and Chad Johnson with Kevin Poulin as the 3rd string. So, it'll be interesting to see what players do make the lineup for the Islanders this year. There's a lot of positions open and a lot of positions that will be battled for. This team is at their weakest on defense. Their strength is up front. This is why they always miss the playoffs, because of their defense and their mediocre goaltending. They got their goaltending situation figured out for now, but their defense is still crippled. Up front, they have an offense that is playoff caliber. They always have one of the best offenses in the league. Offense is not their problem. They are loaded up there. It's on defense where they are at their weakest. We'll get back to that in a minute here, as we now take a look at the Islanders' top 10 prospects. They have some very interesting prospects. As I said, Griffin Reinhart is without a doubt their top prospect. He is a shutdown defenseman, but he's pretty much done playing in the Western Hockey League with the Edmonton Oil Kings. He helped them win the 2014 Memorial Cup. He's 20 years of age. He was the captain of that team, which means he could eventually develop into a leadership role. And, he's ready. The middle brother of the Reinhardts is definitely ready to play. He is going to battle one of those top 6 guys that I mentioned earlier for a spot on that blue line. There's no way that Griffin Reinhardt does not make the team out of training camp next year, in my opinion. However, is he the prospect I personally think is the best in this system? Probably not. I mean, you have some other guys like Anders Lee, who again is a nice power forward who could make the lineup this year. Billy Polka, Michael Dalcal, who they drafted, Scott Mayfield. They have some great prospects, and actually the Islanders have a very deep prospect pool in this top 10. I could see this prospect pool being one of the deepest in the league for this year. However, the prospect that I find the most interesting on this list, and the one I personally think is the best prospect, is their number 2 prospect, offensive weapon on the blue line, Ryan Pulock. Ryan Pulock was the 15th overall pick by the Islanders in the 2013 NHL Draft, and last season through 66 games, he led the Brandon Wheat Kings of the Western Hockey League with 23 goals and 40 assists for a combined 63 points. He is going to be the next Shea Weber on the blue line as far as the offensive ability and the deadly slap shot is concerned. Ryan Pulock had the deadliest slap shot of any player coming out of that draft, as he's a guy who can shoot this puck at about 100 miles per hour. He's going to be a power play quarterback. He's not ready to play this year. He'll probably spend another year down in the WHL, but by 2015-16, he definitely could be ready to play when the team does move to Brooklyn to go to the Barclays Center. That's right, folks. This is the final season of the New York Islanders playing at the Nassau Veterans Memorial Coliseum. They are hoping to make this memorable season, give that building a season to remember and a proper send-off. They want to give their fans on Long Island a proper send-off when they move to the Barclays Center in Brooklyn, New York for the 2015-16 year. But Ryan Pulock could be one of the guys to come up and play when they do officially move to the Barclays Center. It's going to be interesting. He's a big player at 6'1", 218 pounds. It's a decent-sized body, mobile, and as I said earlier, that cannon of a shot is his most dangerous weapon. And he is going to be eventually one of the most dangerous weapons in the National Hockey League. Now, the player on the one thing I did last year that I'm also going to do this year is the player on each team who I think needs to be good in order for them to battle for a playoff spot. So, for me, the player I think that needs to be good in order for the New York Islanders to be a playoff team, you obviously have to look to their captain, John Tavares, and hope that he can be the same John Tavares after coming back from an injury. But honestly, I don't think he's the player that the key player for them that needs to be good to make the playoffs. The player that I think needs to be good for them has to be his wingman, Kyle Okposo. This is going to be a big season for Kyle Okposo. He needs to prove that the numbers he put up last year were not a fluke. I have no doubt I have no problem with thinking that Kyle Okposo's 27 goals and 69 points from last year could have possibly been a fluke. I'm not saying it is a fluke and that he's going to not be the same player, but it's very possible, But he is 26 years of age. He does have one more year to grow. So one could also say, he has a setback year this year and then has a comeback year when he officially enters his prime next year. When he officially enters his prime next year, I think his career could be very well decided on this season. The direction his career goes could very well be decided on this season because this was truly the first real good year that Kyle Okposo ever had in his career, the former 7th overall pick from 2006. The St. Paul, Minnesota native needs to prove that he can be the same Kyle Okposo he was last year, because if he's not, And if last year's thing, and if last year's season was a one-hit wonder type situation, then the Islanders are going to be in very big trouble. Overall, whether Kyle Okposo has a good year or not, and whether John Tavares can have a comeback year, Michael Grabner has a comeback year, whether any of these guys can have comeback years, it's all going to be up to the defense and how well they're going to be able to hold up, and the goaltending and how well Yaroslav Halak is going to be able to hold up. But overall, do I think the Islanders are a playoff team? I like the direction that they're going. I think they are a better team from last year, without a doubt. And I don't think they're going to be last place in the Metropolitan Division again. However, at the same time, I don't think that they are a playoff team just yet. I think that there's a lot more room for improvement. That defense needs to be better. And though they have a lot of deep prospects on defense, the defensive core they have at the moment is not good enough to be stable, and it's not good enough to carry them into the playoffs. I don't think this is a playoff team, but at the same time, I don't think that they are a last place team like they were this past year. I think they'll be in that mix of teams that will just fall out of playoff contention. That's my opinion on the Islanders, and that's the direction they're headed. But by next year, their first year at the Barclays Center, they could very well be a playoff team. So watch out, hockey fans everywhere. The New York Islanders are on the rise, and eventually they will be a stable playoff team and could eventually challenge for another cup, potentially. And with that being said, that'll do it for episode 133 of Hockey on the Spot. Be sure to tune in tomorrow when the 30 teams in 30 days continues on day 2 with the Carolina Hurricanes. Until then, this has been Hockey on the Spot with Brandon Barenfeld. I'm Brandon Barenfeld. Thank you guys for joining me, and I will see you again tomorrow. Thank you, and have a great day.